My name is Sabrina and I read 61 books in 2023. In this video I'm going to be talking about all of them. I'm going to try to keep it brief so that the video isn't too long, but let's just get into it. The first book I read in 2023 is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. This book follows our main character who's a young teenage boy who one day helps his elderly neighbor, and then his neighbor has to go to the hospital and he ends up staying at his house to take care of his dog. And basically he finds out that his neighbor has like this portal in his shed that leads to another world. This book was really fun and unique and I enjoyed it. I only give it 3 stars though because it was really slow in the beginning and there was a really weird part about like losing their virginity that I just didn't mesh with well. After that I read The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This book is set in a post-apocalyptic world and it follows a father and his son who are trying to survive. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it but it didn't wow me. After that I read Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. This book follows a young black babysitter and a wealthy privileged white lady that she babysits for. The babysitter is the victim of an act of racism, and from there the story starts. It's an examination of racism and privilege. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it, but I wasn't that into it. Next, I read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. This book is about a young girl that's growing up in Chicago, and she's Latina. I gave this book 2 stars. I admired what the author was trying to do, but just personally I couldn't get into it. But I think that's less about, my rating at least, is less about the quality of the book and more so just my personal enjoyment. I do see why people would really like this one. Next, I read The Sixth Extinction, An Unnatural History by Elizabeth Colbert. This book talked about the great mass extinction event that humans are causing. It talks about like different animals that once existed that are now extinct, stuff like that. I found this book to be really interesting, especially the different chapters on animals that are extinct. But ultimately, I just do not have a mind for science, so it was a little difficult and boring at times. I gave it 3 stars. After that, I read A Very Easy Death by Simone de Beauvoir. This book is a day-by-day recounting of her mother's death. I gave it 3 stars. I liked it, but it was very short and I wanted more from it. I think I wanted more emotion from her, which maybe isn't a fair expectation to have, but I was expecting a very like emo book and it was not that. Next, I read Black Swans by Eve Babbitt. This is a collection of short stories set in the 80s and 90s that talk about the decades of dreams, drink, and glimpses of a changing world. I gave this book 4 stars, I believe. Yes, 4 stars. I loved the writing. This makes me want to pick up more by Eve Babbitt for sure. After that, I read Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal by Jeanette Winterson. This is her memoir. It talks a lot about her childhood and her mother, who was a very difficult woman. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it, but ultimately it wasn't that memorable. Next, I read The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This book follows a bunch of different final girls, which means that they were the only people who survived like a homicide or something like that. And they're all in the support group together, but then one by one they start being picked off by someone and killed. This book was really fun. I gave it 3 stars. It made me really want to pick up some more thrillers. After that, I picked up My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. Can't say that to save my life. Sorry to my Polish ancestors. This is a collection of essays all about like feminism, what it's like to be a model, what it's like her relationship with her body because of that. I also gave this book 3 stars. I liked it, but I felt like it was also a little bit tone deaf in some instances. Like she wasn't really aware of her privilege sometimes and it got a little annoying. After that, I read When You Were Engulfed in Flame by David Sedaris. This is a collection of essays about his life. They're often humorous. I liked it, but it didn't really stick with me that much. Oh, I guess I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars, so I'll take that back. I really liked it. Next, I read No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. This book follows a guy who's just like miserable and hates people, and that's just like pretty much it. I gave it 3 stars, but it's really more like a 2 star. I didn't really enjoy this one that much, and it's been very forgettable. I don't remember much of it at all. After that, I read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This book follows her main character Tress, who's very happy in her life on her little island. She has a big crush on the governor's son, but then one day the governor sends his son away, and she decides that she's going to travel across the sea to go get him. The only difference though is that her sea is not made of water, but of these things called spores that react to water and tend to be very dangerous. So she goes on this adventure with a bunch of pirates. It's a whole thing. I really like this book. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was charming. I thought it was really unique, and I loved the magic system. After that, I read The Seaplane on Final Approach. That's what it's called, right? Yes. This book follows the main character who's obsessed with the idea of sleaze. She moves to Alaska to work at this, I don't even know what to call it. It's like a homestead, but it's kind of like a hotel at the same time. It's like this lodge, I guess. At the same time, she's also like kind of obsessed with her aunt's stepson and she wants to have sex with him. I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. It just, in every way, this book was not for me. After that, I read Death in Her Hands by Tesha Moshfegh. This book follows our main character who's an elderly woman, and when she's on a walk with her dog one day, she finds this note that says, "Her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here's her dead body." And she then becomes obsessed with the idea that this woman was murdered and tries to look into it herself. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was interesting and I liked it, but ultimately it wasn't a new favorite. Then I read Realm Breaker by Victoria Aveyard. This book follows her main character Corianne, who one day an assassin that's like ever living, what's that called, immortal? An immortal assassin comes to her door and tells her that she's the key to saving the universe because of her unique bloodline. I gave this book 2 stars. It was way too long, it wasn't that interesting, and I think Victoria Aveyard can do a lot better than this. After that, I read Binti by Nandia Korafor. This book follows our main character Binti, who was just accepted into this prestigious university that's on a different planet, and as she's traveling to go there, her spaceship is overtaken by this alien race that they're at war with. I hated this book. I gave it 1 star. I just felt like the ending was resolved way too conveniently. Then I read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I don't know how to describe this one because it's not a love story, but it's also like, it follows the story of these people, Heathcliff and Catherine, and their feelings for each other, and also how awful they are to everyone around them. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought the writing was gorgeous. I liked the book a lot, but it isn't a favorite classic, and I still like Jane Eyre much better if we're talking about the Brontes. Then I read Kim Jae-yoon, born 1982, by Cho Nam-jo. This book is a commentary on sexism in South Korea, and it follows this one woman, and basically every sexist act that can happens to her. I gave this book 2 stars, I think. I gave this book 3 stars, which is crazy because now I think I'd give it like 1 or 2. This book is just so unmemorable. I've forgotten every single part of it. I can't remember anything that happened in it, so I'm gonna change this rating to like, I'll give it 2 stars instead of 1 because it's not really the book's fault, but it did not stay with me. Then I read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This book follows 39 women who lived underground imprisoned in a cage. They have no memory of why they're there. All they know is that there are guards who bring them food, and then one day they escape. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought that it was so cool, so interesting, and such a unique story. Then I read Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a book that's inspired by, I believe, Navajo mythology, and it follows our main character who's like a monster hunter, and when a town needs help finding a missing girl, she is their best hope, but she soon uncovers things about the monsters that are terrifying and makes it a much bigger issue than previously thought. I like this book a lot. I gave it 4 stars. It is the first in a series though. I just feel like it felt better as a standalone than as the first book in the series, so I'm probably not going to continue on with the series. But again, 4 stars. For that, I read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Thurgeon. This book follows a masquerade ball that's held, and at the end of the night, Evelyn Hardcastle dies. And it follows her main character, Aidan Bishop, who has been given the task of identifying the murderer, and every day this murder happens over and over and over, and he wakes up in the body of a different guest. And he has about 7 days to find out who killed her. I thought this book was brilliant. I gave it 4 stars. It was so fun. I got into it so quickly and I could not put it down. After that, I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book follows a girl named Daisy who is coming of age in LA in the late 60s, as well as the band The Six. And then Daisy crosses paths with this band and ends up joining them, and there's just all this trauma that happens. I believe it's inspired by Fleetwood Mac, and it takes place in like an interview style. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I don't know if that's like mind-blowing or anything like that. Then I read You Could Make This Place Beautiful by Maggie Smith. This is a memoir that talks about her divorce. I thought this book was absolutely beautiful. The writing was amazing, and I gave this book 4 stars. Then I read The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. This book follows a main character who has no memory and wakes up in a place that resembles medieval England, and all he has is some loose pages from a book telling him how to survive. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was really fun, but it's by no means the best Brandon Sanderson book. Then I read We Do This Till We Free Us, Abolitionists Organizing and Transforming Justice by Marianne Kawa. This is a book about abolition. I gave it 3 stars. I felt like there was a lot of great stuff in here, but I didn't really like the format. It was like a random collection of essays and interviews. I just feel like it didn't flow very well. After that, I read I Love Dick by Chris Kraus. This is the story of a woman who becomes obsessed with a man named Dick, even though she's already married. She starts to write letters to him, and her husband joins in, also writing letters to him. They tell him about it. She's just obsessed with this guy. I gave this book 2 stars. It was really boring, honestly. And there's also a lot about art in here that she just goes on and on and on about, but I'm forever keeping it because of the title. Then I read Scammer by Caroline Calloway. This is her memoir that talks about her dad's suicide, her reputation online, her being called a scammer. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was really fun and really interesting, actually, and I would very much like to read whatever else she puts out. Then I read Bared to You by Sylvia Day. This is an erotica book and I was just trying out to see how I liked it because I've never read anything like it before. I ended up not liking it. I gave it 2 stars. I thought that the main love interest was very aggressive and like kind of abusive, and it just was wholly not for me. Then I read Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This book follows our main character Cassandra, or Cassie, I forget what her name is, who has her dream job in Silicon Valley. However, she's insanely depressed. She is doing a ton of drugs, and she feels like there's this black hole that's constantly following her throughout her life. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was really cool, really imaginative, with the black hole element, and I just really liked it. I thought it was dark and raw. Next, I read People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This book follows 2 main characters, what are their names? Alex and Poppy, who were best friends and would always go on vacations together, but something happened a couple years ago and they haven't spoken since. However, Poppy tries to get the gang back together, the gang being just the 2 of them, so I don't know why I said it like that. And invites someone on their vacation, and things progress from there. I gave this book 4 stars. This was the first Emily Henry book I read, and I really liked it. I thought it was really sweet. Then I read Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. This book follows 2 best friends. One is an author who meets a boy on Tinder and invites him to Rome. The other is much less successful career-wise. She's getting over a breakup and she's flirting with her childhood friend Simon. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked this more than Conversations with Friends, but less than Normal People. After that, I read The Vegetarian by Hong Kong. This book follows a woman living in South Korea who one day decides to become a vegetarian, and this drives her husband and her family absolutely bonkers. I gave this book 3 stars, but it's actually kind of disappointing because I was expecting to love this book and I just thought it was alright. Then I read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Mal El Motar and Max Gladstone. This book follows the characters Red and Blue, who are both on opposite sides of the time war, and they start leaving each other letters in different places and time periods, and eventually they start to fall in love. This book I wanted to like so bad, but I just couldn't get into it. It felt too disjointed for me. I just felt like I needed something to ground the plot a bit more, because you're really just thrown into this world with like, there's no easing into it. So again, I gave this book 2 stars. After that, I read Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This book follows our main character Kiko, who works at a convenience store, and she loves it. She feels that the convenience store lets her understand social interactions, and she's very happy with her job and her life, but her family wants her to branch out. Her family wants her to get a real job, meet a husband, and she's just not up for that. I give this book 3 stars. I liked it, but I didn't like it that much. Then I read The 5th Season. Oh, I have this book. I can hold it up. Where is it? But I read The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a high fantasy book that takes place in a world that is ending, and you're following 3 main characters. They all have magic, and magic in this world is highly looked down upon. So one of the main characters is hiding her magic, and one day she walks into her home to find that her young son was murdered by her husband. There's another character who is a young girl whose magic was just discovered and she's been taken to the magic school. And then there's a third woman who has been at the magic school for some time and is now going out of the school on a quest. I went insane for this series, and right after I finished this book, I read, oh, where is it? I read The Obelisk Gate, which is book 2, and then The Stone Sky, which is book 3. I gave all of these books 5 stars. I was just absolutely obsessed with this series, and I highly recommend it. Next, I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This book follows 2 main characters. One of them is Nora, who works as a literary agent in the city, and another, what's his name? Another is Charlie, who is a who's an editor. I don't know why I started to say bookish. And Nora's sister wants her to take a vacation, so they go to this very rural North Carolina town, and she ends up meeting the editor there, and things progress from there. I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. Again, just like People We Meet on Vacation, I just thought it was really sweet and very cute. Then I read Normal People by Sally Rooney. This book follows the story of Connell and Marianne, who both grew up in the same small town and start to see each other secretly in high school. It then follows them throughout college and afterwards. It just follows their relationship throughout time. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I was not expecting to like it because Sally Rooney hasn't really been that great for me in the past, but God, this is a must read. After that, I read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and it follows our main character, what's her name? Miriam, who is the daughter of a moneylender, but her dad is really bad at his job, and never asks for the money back, so her family is very poor. She decides to take over his job, and gradually the family becomes very wealthy, but this attracts the interest of this like Ice King guy who then steals her and wants her to turn money into gold for him. I gave this book 2 stars. I honestly did not like it. I was looking forward to it because I really liked Uprooted by the same author, but this one was a disappointment. I just thought it was kind of boring and I couldn't get into it. Then I read The 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. This is the history of settler colonialism in Palestine. This book offers such a comprehensive history of Palestine. I really think this is a must read for everyone, especially given the ongoing genocide. I absolutely loved this. It's also very easy to read considering that it's a historical nonfiction book. Highly recommend. I give it 5 stars, by the way. Then I read Babel by R.F. Kuang. This book takes place in a world where there's like a silver magic system. You can carve certain words into silver and then it does different things. And it follows our main character Robin Swift, who lives in China, but then his mother dies and a wealthy English professor comes and gets him and trains him so that he can get into Oxford. Once he's at Oxford, he's in the language program and he starts to see this group that's stealing silver from the university and redistributing it. This book has a lot to do with sexism, imperialism, racism. I just thought this was such a good book, and it was really refreshing to see these themes discussed so blatantly. I give it 4 stars. Then I read Woman Talking by Miriam Towles. This book follows a group of Mennonite women who for years thought that they were being visited by demons in their sleep, but it was actually the men of their community who were drugging them and then sexually assaulting them. This book takes place well after all of those events though, and it takes place in a barn where these women are meeting to discuss whether they should stay in their community or whether they should leave. I gave this book 2 stars. I thought it was pretty boring. I didn't like that it was told through the perspective of a guy when I just feel like there are so many women in this book, why did they add an unnecessary male character? And I just feel like they were very blasé about the subject of sexual assault. They never really gave it the depth that that conversation deserves. Then I read The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. This is the sequel series to A Darker Shade of Magic. A Darker Shade of Magic follows this magic system where there's 4 different Londons that have varying degree of magic, and there are certain people with magical power that allows them to jump between these Londons. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed seeing old familiar characters as well as some new ones. I can't wait for the next book in this series to come out. After that, I read Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. This book follows 2 main characters, Yumi, who is a sacred person and travels from village to village talking to the spirits, and Painter, who has a job as a nightmare painter, because in his world nightmares come to life and the only way to subdue them is to paint them and turn them into something different. But then one day Painter wakes up in Yumi's body and things go crazy from there. I gave this book 2 stars. I hated the inclusion of the humor and I didn't really like the love story in here. I didn't really think it made sense. Then I read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book takes place in a military academy, and it follows our main character who originally was going to join the scribes, but then is forced to join like the Dragon Rider division, which is like just full of all these deadly competitions. This book is so goddamn popular. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't think it was great writing. I can see the appeal, because it's a very like fast, entertaining book, but it wasn't that special. And then immediately afterwards, I read the sequel, Iron Flame, and I gave that 3 stars as well. It wasn't as unputdownable as the first one, but it was still fun. Then I read The Dark Mirror by Juliette Marillier. This book follows our main character Bridie, who is being taught by a druid how to be a king. One day he wakes up while the druid is gone, and he finds a baby on the doorstep and decides to take it in. The druid is not happy about this, but he allows it because he loves Bridie. I gave this book, how many stars did I give this book? I gave this book 1 star. This book was so awful. It was so incredibly boring. I can't get over how slow it was. The love story was really, really weird and unsettling. I did not like this book. Then I read If You Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This book takes place at a prestigious acting university and follows a group of last year students when a crime occurs. And from the beginning of the book, you're following your main character Oliver, and you're aware that he is in prison, but you don't know what for. So this book follows like the story of the crime, what happens afterwards. I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was just a really fun dark academia book, and it just gripped me from the very beginning. Then I read Blood Rights by Barbara Ehrenreich. This is about the origins and history of the passions of war. I gave this book 2 stars. I did not like it. It just all felt made up. I don't know why, it just did. Then I read The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. This book follows 6 characters who have all been asked to join this like secret society, and they've all been told from the very beginning that only 5 of them can progress onto the next year. And all these people have specific like magical powers. Some of them can like control fire and air, others can read minds, like they all have their own unique abilities, so they're all thrown into this place together and they have to get along and work together, but they also have to keep in mind that they're going to be voting someone out at a certain point. I gave this book 4 stars. It took me a little while to get into it, and there wasn't a lot going on plot-wise, but I really liked the character development. I thought that each character had their own distinct voice in their POV chapters, which was really well done. I do think it could have done with a bit more world building though. Then I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This book follows our main character, what's her name? Elle. Her name is Elle. Who is in this magic school that's super deadly, but essentially your chances of surviving if you go to the magic school are much greater than if you don't. In the beginning of the book, this man named Orion saves her from some creature in the school, and she hates him for it, and she hates him a lot and talks about it a lot. She has no friends, and she's just insufferable. I hated her. I gave this book 2 stars. I will not be continuing on with the series. It was not a fun read. After that, I read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This book follows our main character Zachary, who one day when he was very young saw this door that was created in an alleyway and did not go through. But then years and years later, when he's a grad student, he picks up this book from the library that actually tells the story of him finding this door when he was younger. And from there on, he goes on this whole big adventure with these secret societies, and he meets other people whose stories are mentioned in the book. I gave this book 3 stars. It honestly felt like a fever dream. If you want more in my thoughts on this, you can look at my Dark Academia video, just saying. Then for the same video, I picked up Bunny by Mona Awad. This book follows the main character Samantha, who is in a grad writing program. All the other people in her program are also women, but they're all best friends. They call each other Bunny. They're all rich and snobby, and she hates them. Until one day she's invited to hang out with them, and from there everything changes. This book is super freaking weird, like just so absurd and crazy. I give it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. From there, I read Big Swiss by Jen Began. This book follows her main character, Greta. I don't know where I got Olga from. This book follows the main character, Greta, who is working as a transcriptionist for a sex therapist. And through transcribing his therapy session, she falls in love with one of his patients, who she names Big Swiss, who has been through a really awful trauma, and then she meets Big Swiss in real life and she starts to fall in love with her. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was enjoyable, but I wasn't crazy about it. Then I picked up Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This book follows 2 writers, Athena and June. Athena is a very successful author, and June has not seen the same success herself. She kind of hates Athena, but she hangs out with her anyway. And one day when they're hanging out, Athena dies in front of her, and she steals Athena's unpublished manuscript that she hasn't told anyone about and sells it off as her own. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it, and I thought there's like some really important messages in here, especially about like racism in the publishing industry, but ultimately I think there's a lot more she could have explored in here. Then I read Wayward by Amelia Hart. Sorry, Amelia. This book follows 3 different women. One is a woman in the 1600s who's being on trial for being a witch. Another is taking place in the 1940s, following this woman who lives on this grand estate who's trying to find out about her mother, who she never knew. And then another woman in the current day in 2019 who is escaping an abusive relationship. All of these women are from the same family, and all of these women have an affinity for nature. I gave this book 2 stars. It's historical fiction, but it really feels like it could have happened during any time period. I just couldn't get into it, and I don't see the hype. After that, I read Happy Place by Emily Henry, my 3rd Emily Henry book this year, which is crazy. This book follows Harriet and Wynne, who have been together for like ever, but they break up and they don't tell their friends. And then at their annual like friends vacation, they have to pretend that they're still together. I gave this book 3 stars. Just like the other Emily Henry books, I thought it was very sweet and cute. I think she's very good at writing romance books. Now we are down to our final 2. The second to last book is a very random one, and that is Learning to Speak Alzheimer's, a groundbreaking approach for everyone dealing with the disease by Joanne Cohen-Cost. This book is very self-explanatory. It's like to help you deal with Alzheimer's. I picked it up because my grandmother has dementia, but it turns out Alzheimer's is a very different thing. So there wasn't much in here that was helpful for me. I'd give it 3 stars because I learned a lot about Alzheimer's. I think it would be really helpful for anyone that's going through that. And the very last book that I read in 2023 is Underground America: Narratives of Undocumented Lives. This is a series of first-hand accounts of living undocumented in America. I thought this book was incredibly touching. It just shows like the courage and bravery of these people and how terribly they're treated and how vulnerable they are in American society. I think this is a must read, and I give it 4 stars. So there you go. If you happen to make it to the end of this video, that is crazy. Please tell me below, because I don't believe anyone's gonna watch this video till the end, because I feel like it's been so long. But those are the 61 books I read in 2023. In 2024, hopefully I read even more books, but we'll see. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video. Goodbye.